Hello everybody, welcome back to another Top 10 Commander video. This time we have the new set, Zendikar Rising, to go over. And I think just experiencing this past week or two of spoilers, we see what looks to be a pretty good set for Commander as a format, especially when you look back to previous sets in Zendikar. Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch, I don't think quite did enough for the format. A lot of the focus was still on the Eldrazi, and I think there was a lot of misplaced hype over full art lands, and that soon just became something that you saw everywhere, and it wasn't really something special for Zendikar anymore. While we still get full art lands this time around, it looks like there is going to be some decent support for Commander, although I will say, this isn't going to be another Ikoria, this isn't going to be another home run set. Returning to familiarity, I think it's going to be kind of a disappointment for some people. I know I've been hearing quite a few already disappointed, going through white and then blue and thinking, wow, this set is terrible. And then once you get to multicolor and colorless, then it's a completely different story. So let's start it off here with the honorable mentions. We have Kaza, Royal Chaser. I like Wizard Tribal, and this is very close to being in the top 10. I think 2 mana and being able to tap to reduce the cost of an instant or sorcery is pretty solid. I don't know if it's going to do enough for Wizard Tribal to really make a powerful deck around this. I think some of the best Wizard decks tend to be combo decks anyway. And then we have Leyline Tyrant. I like this card. I like the idea of maybe changing the pace of how red plays. Instead of being more aggressive, you're saving up your stamps. So Leyline Tyrant could be that creature where if your opponent does something to anger you, you could sacrifice it in response with a sack outlet and then just pour a bunch of red mana into it and burn that player. I think it's a very good card. I wish it was a Commander option, because we need change of pace cards in certain colors. I think we could slow down red and maybe speed up another color. We have Grakmaw Skyclave Ravager. I really like this card as a Commander. I think it could be a very powerful Commander option, but it just seems like it does more of the same, and you could kind of get the same value if you wanted to go with Mazarek Krell Death Priest, Rayhan Last of the Abzan. Kind of the same idea. I guess the added benefit is that you have Hydra synergies, but other than that, it doesn't really wow me. And then we have a powerful spell, Maddening Cacophony. I like it. I think it's going to be pretty good in Commander. I just don't recommend these cards. Most mill strategies that are just play a card and then win the game, I think are kind of annoying. It takes a lot of the strategy out of the game. I think if you have a strategy where you play good enough to compete to the late game, and then you find a way to win then, I think that's usually the way I recommend playing because it's the funnest for everybody. To me, it's just too simple, it's too easy, it's not something that I think people are going to have the most fun fooling around with. So let's start it off here. Number 10, Zareth San the Trickster. Now, I'm not going to be including the Zendikar Commander deck commanders, just because they're not part of the main set. You know, it's pretty much just a pre-constructed product that anybody can go and get. You don't really need recommendations beyond that. I think Zareth San could make a decent rogue commander. The reason why I put it at number 10 is that I think it's almost a little bit too much like ninjutsu, and I wish that rogue was something of its own. Still like it though, you can reanimate something or bring back any permanent from an opponent's graveyard if you dealt damage with Zareth San. So I think there's definitely something there. Number 9, we have Aura, Skyclave Hierophant. If we talk about just adding to a strategy that maybe exists, but it's not strong, I think Aura definitely adds to it. I don't know if it's going to be enough to really make clerics relevant. I have played clerics before in Commander. They're not really that strong, but I think it's nice because you have a lot of really cheap clerics that you can take advantage of, like Soul Warden, we have Mother of Runes. Those tend to die pretty early on. If you have what is essentially a scrap trawler for clerics, it's a lot easier to bring them back, and you could take advantage of their value even more. And to be honest, having a way to bring them back makes them that much more powerful in a cleric strategy where I don't think there was a lot of reanimation, so recovery was pretty poor. I think Aura is definitely going to fit in well. Number 8 is Nissa of Shattered Boughs. It's been a while since I felt like putting Planeswalkers on a top 10 list, and I think Nissa just barely makes it. I think the Jace with Kicker is interesting, but it doesn't really do that much. The Nissa, at least you can cheat something into play, and a landfall trigger that just adds loyalty counters is ridiculous because in landfall decks, you could get 3 or 4 lands a turn pretty easily. So it likely means in those decks, the turn you get are out. You can just alter and then cheat something into play. I think that is definitely worthy of being on a top 10. Maybe not the most creative, but if Planeswalkers gain synergy, like if you're playing a landfall deck, having a landfall trigger period is going to be good. Having it on a Planeswalker permanent means that it's going to guarantee that synergy. It's not just a Planeswalker that happens to be good with lands. There is a direct synergy there. Number 7 is Verizal, the Split Current. This is one I already made a commander deck of, and this is what I'm talking about, adding to a strategy that could be there, but isn't that strong. I think Kicker still has quite a long way to go. But compared to Halar from Dominaria that also was a kicker commander option, Verizal could be even more fun because copying spells tends to be more chaotic, which means you're going to often have fun with a relatively unpredictable strategy. This unpredictability is added on to the fact that we have some pretty powerful kicker spells in blue, like Rite of Replication. We also have Maddening Cacophony, so you do have some powerful spells. I wouldn't say Kicker's really that strong, but having an option like this where you can remove counters and copy spells, it's pretty unique. It's leaning towards more unique, and that's what we really need in Commander. Number 6 is Linvala, Shield of Seagate. The first ability is something you could probably ignore unless you wanted to make a party deck. Otherwise, it's not going to be that easy to get. The second ability is really why I think Linvala deserves to be on the top 10. Selfless Spirit was already one of the most annoying 2-drop creatures that you could sacrifice to make your whole team indestructible. For only really paying 1 more mana and I guess another color, you get that with the option of giving your team hexproof instead, so you can really dodge a lot of removal, you can dodge a lot of answers. It's not something I think is going to be the easiest to build around as a commander because again, you're going to want to fool around with a party mechanic. But protection spells, whenever you have a way to guarantee that your board presence remains, you've got yourself a pretty powerful card here. It's not going to really introduce a new strategy. I think it is pretty simple, but what it does is pretty powerful. A card that I think is going to be pretty interesting, maybe if you like stacks, this is something for you, but Yasharn, Implacable Earth, as number 5. We have a 4-mana creature here that pretty much makes it so that our opponents can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. I think having it as a commander means that you can directly go for a stack strategy and maybe also focus on lands too. When it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a basic forest and a basic plains card. So it really helps to solve one of the key problems that many players face in Commander. It's running short of land drops. Like even if you're playing green, you could still run short of land drops. The fact that you play your commander, you get 2 for your next turns, I think is playing it safe. But again, that restriction really forcing your opponents to play a certain way. And believe it or not, there are so many commanders, there are so many decks, and just strategies in general where you have to pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents in order for that deck to work. I think Grakmaw, the commander option we were talking about earlier, is a pretty good example of a deck that would want to sacrifice in order to function. There's also a ton of pay life to activate certain abilities in Commander, so this shutting down both of those is insanely powerful, especially with a legendary creature that could be your commander. Number 4 is Forsaken Monument. Now in my spoiler videos I mentioned how whenever you see a 4 or 5 costed artifact that's a mythic, look out because it's probably going to be pretty good for Commander. Forsaken Monument is the first one of 2. What you have here is a Caged Sun for colorless. It's even better than Caged Sun because it counts your mana rocks like Soul Ring. You get an additional colorless for tapping it. It really just adds that strength to a colorless deck, which are already pretty decent. Making it so you can play something like an Eldrazi a lot easier is usually going to help you win the game. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2 as well, so don't forget that. And you also get a bit of life gain, which colorless, you might have some ways with equipment, but here you have a way to gain 2 life whenever you cast a colorless spell. So whether you're playing artifacts or just colorless cards in general like Eldrazi, this is going to be insanely powerful for your deck. Number 3 is Ancient Green Warden. Now, this is kind of the rule. Yes, it's more of the same, but if it's more of the same of something that was already insanely powerful, it has to be high on the list. An Ancient Green Warden pretty much being a Crucible of Worlds plus a Yarok trigger for lands is insane. Yes, we have some decent commander options that can already kind of do this. I mean, we do have the combination of Muldrotha and Yarok, but this is going to apply to just any landfall strategy, because chances are they're going to be playing green. So if you're just playing mono green, you benefit. You have another staple. And in landfall, you have a lot of ways to sacrifice lands. You want to be able to play them all over again. I just see it being more of the same and continuing to allow landfall to be one of the most dominant strategies in Commander. Speaking of landfall, we have number 2, and this card is frickin' ridiculous. Morag, Fury of Akum, 6 mana, 6/6. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. Its landfall trigger might just be one of the most powerful ever made. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, you get an additional combat phase after that phase, and at the beginning of combat, untap all creatures you control. So they're also getting +1 for each time they've attacked this turn. So each time you get an extra combat, which in, again, many landfall strategies, you can get 3 or 4 lands a turn. That's an insane amount of power you're swinging with over and over again. I think a lot of the issues, if there are any issues in landfall, it's that you're able to develop a large board, but you maybe don't have just quite enough to swing all out without feeling like you might leave yourself open for a counterattack or some kind of board wipe to really punish you. Morag could be that card where there's just no way your opponents can come back. If you have all those Avenger of Zendikar tokens and they get +1/+0 and you're repeatedly attacking with them, they're getting even more power. Maybe they already have a ton of +1/+1 counters. I just don't see most opponents coming back from something like this. It's that insane. But number one is the card that I think is probably the best, and you probably already know it. It's an artifact with engine in its name. Lithoform Engine. You have the first ability, which can copy activated or triggered abilities. The second ability can copy instant or sorcery spells, and the last ability can just copy permanent spells, which means you can pretty much copy whatever you play. So long as it's on the stack, it's a spell. Holy cow, is this going to be powerful. Now, if you love Strionic Resonator, here you have another Strionic Resonator. If you liked Rings of Brighthearth, here you have another Rings of Brighthearth. If you like copying instants or sorceries, you just have to pay 3 mana and tap it, and you can copy whatever you want. I don't know if copying is ever going to be this easy, but you have something you can throw into just about every deck. If you do need to copy anything, you have the copy machine. That's really all it is. And I think it's going to see a ton of play in a variety of decks. Maybe not every deck, but I just think its versatility means that it's going to lend itself well to many strategies. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think about this top 10 for Zendikar Rising. Also, let me know what you think about the set. Hope you all have a good one. Void here signing off. See you all next time.